Alright, so I just got done talking about what I would call the outer turrets, which are just located outside of anyone's particular base. And I kind of stopped there because that's basically the end of the point where things are simple. Because when it comes to inhibitors, there's a little bit more, I always like to use the word nuance to it. The effects of taking an inhibitor turret without its inhibitor, are kind of up to discussion, and also what Nexus turrets are important or related to with respect to other turrets, and you just kind of have to work it out in your head using this basic logic in order to figure out what you think these turrets are worth. Because it's a little bit more, it becomes more opinionated once you start hitting inhibitor turrets. Because you start to make some really crazy trades with, let's use a theoretical example to discover the worth of a mid inhibitor turret. So what exactly would you want to trade for a middle inhibitor turret and still feel okay with? I mean, we obviously can trade both of these because that only equals 3, so let's say that's 3. We would be perfectly fine with taking a middle inhibitor turret for top tier 1, tier 2. So let's verge it that it's, it's not 3. Now this is a very weird occurrence, and I'm just talking about the turret here, not the inhibitor. Here's a weird occurrence of what could happen. Let's say we trade, this is really weird, but it really brings it home. Let's trade the tier 1, tier 2 of our mid lane to capture their turret. Now that would give it a value of 7. Now my gut, and as I said, this is kind of opinionated, so you need to kind of discover it for yourself. I I really wouldn't want to give up this much real estate for an inhibitor turret, given that we're not going to get the inhibitor. Getting the inhibitor, it completely changes everything, but it becomes way too time related in order to talk about it in this simple way. So I would say that it's actually worth less than 7 because I wouldn't want to make this trade. But if we look at the closest trade that we can make that I find okay with, let's mark this out here. We're not going for 7. Let's say we traded it for our own, but turrets, and this feels almost equivalent in my head, giving out both bot turrets for just one inhibitor turret. And there, like I said, it becomes incredibly nuanced, appropriate to a certain situation. But as far as it, I think the best thing you could agree on is 5 of just the turret. And funny enough, that follows the linear logic here. However, using this basis in order to discover it further cements a different fact, which the break in linearity comes when you approach the other turrets. Now, for me, I'm always going to rate top as a little bit less, but I'll say that it's 4.5, just for name and sake. Because I would be fine with taking top outer, or top inhibitor for mid outer, or mid tier 2, is what I mean. That seems like an okay trade. Like, I feel we come out on top of it, but it's not exactly 5 because it's not as worth as much as the mid lane, and we've already worked out how much the mid lane should be over here. So I'm going to give it a value of 4.5. However, bot lane, you know, bot lane I'd also give it a rating of 5, and that one I have to cheat and kind of approach nuance to, you know, substantiate a claim of 5, and everybody knows it's the big B word. It's the big B word over here. That's why bot can be worth as much as mid, because the amount of pressure that you can start getting from this is immense. And once again, this is not including the inhibitor. This is just the inhibitor turret, and it's because it opens up the snaky route to go and grab an inhibitor for Baron, which is always another interesting trade to make that we would need to have a discussion on and have further discussion, but that's too much for this time. So now we've discovered how much these turrets are: 4.5, 5, and 5. We can move further into the base, which these start becoming very, once again, interesting, because if we're taking out its base value without any of the additional effects of taking out a Nexus turret, which would imply Nexus, because if you take the Nexus, you win. But let's just talk about the values of the turrets themselves. Value of the turrets themselves. So let's do the same thing. Let's ask ourselves what we would trade on our side for one of these. So let's say we get this turret. What would be fine? Just one of them. What would be fine with taking? Let's see. I would give I'd give top, so we know it's more than 4.5. Let's erase these since we don't need these anymore. We know it's more than 4.5, which should be pretty easy to say. More than 4.5. Would we give mid without the inhibitor? Sure as hell we could, so it's more than 5. Would we give top inner and middle? Should give it a value of, or sorry, this one. Let's take top inner and middle inhibitor, which would be a value of 7. Thinking about it, you know, that almost feels fair. That almost feels fair if you think about it. And it's up to you. Your own interpretation, but that's what I'm feeling. So we can say that we're giving a top inner and a middle inhibitor turret. And that feels about right for taking one of these. One of the Nexus turrets. So we'll give that a value of 7. And once again, we approach the edge of nuance because we're inside the enemy's base. It opens up the Nexus. It decreases the power and position of the other one. And taking both obviously is almost infinitely better. Like that's the top one. So you could say that taking both, you know, you could just throw out that you would take both for one of these easily, and probably a ton of other stuff without the effects. So we can just give them both a rating of taking both in Nexus turrets gives you a value of 15 as far as this trading map stuff goes. Now, that probably doesn't make sense to anybody, but just trying to get a handle on this. Once again, not including inhibitors, not including the Nexus or any what I would call time-dependent things, except when I'm trying to validify my assertion that bot inhibitor turret's equivalent to the mid inhibitor turret. And that's a very interesting concept here, because you actually see a bump of 2 right here, which means a lot of interesting things happen around here, but that'll be discussed at a later point when I get onto what I would call more advanced concepts.